Hey y'all, hope you're doing well today. So in today's message, I want to share some thoughts on the concept of forging our way forward, especially after a very challenging time and specifically when our minds have been worked, right? And we're going to be talking about forging our way forward, specifically as it relates to discerning truth from falsehood, truth from lies, because we know that what makes a lie effective for these wolves in sheep's clothing is the fact that they masquerade as the truth. And what we really want to do is learn to have an effective gatekeeper role, which is in all the fairy tales and folklore, right? It's that checkpoint in our mind that catches everything that comes at us externally and internally. The internal part is a little bit more difficult to catch because we take our thoughts for granted, assuming that they're coming from us. And in reality, we're told in the Bible that we're supposed to take every thought captive and check it against the Word of God. And how often do we really do that? And that, to me, is the most effective way that the devil can sneak in and impact our life. Again, because what's his goal? We're told that it's to kill, steal, and destroy. And how effective is it to get someone? I feel like that's probably, through the spiritual lens, the most effective way to accomplish that is to get someone to self-destruct, to plant that seed and deceive the person into thinking that these negative and harmful thoughts that come into their mind, to deceive that person into thinking that those thoughts are their own. See, because then we just accept it. So that's going to be a big part of what we're talking about today. Again, I hope you're doing good. It's still kind of early for me, and I've already finished my coffee, but you'd think I'd be a little bit more awake, but I don't know. I think some days we're just more tired than others, and that's okay. We can give ourselves grace. So, okay, forging our path forward, right? So let me just start by saying this. Regardless of what you're thinking of, if it's like a career path or whatever, so many different directions you can take this. I know that you absolutely can go your own way, like Fleetwood Mac sings about, right? And break the rigidity of the standard ways of making a living, of doing life. You can absolutely go your own way, because I've done it, and so it can be done. And I just want to encourage you to think outside the box, to understand that it's to learn to catch those little seeds of doubt. And I say this because, as being part of something greater than ourselves, like being a spark of that greater eternal spiritual fire that's always churning and burning and has the power to create. Again, the Bible tells us that with God all things are possible, and so we are a part of that. And I think we forget that sometimes, that we remember, faith without action is dead, but you have to start with the belief. That's first. And so, to me, from the devil's point of view, I can imagine that the most effective way to stop that, right, to win the battle is to stop it before it begins. And to put out those fires within all of the little God sparks that are running around this world, us. And so just try to catch those little seeds of doubt, and just cling to those that feeling inside of you, that drive inside of you, that mustard seed of faith, because it's way more powerful than the seed of doubt. Even if they're the same size, it's still way more powerful. So I just want to encourage you. And there are a lot of people who have awesome stories of rags to riches and stuff like this, And I understand that a lot of times in life, there's a lot of things that are outside of our control. Our circumstances can be very, very challenging, and I get that. And I don't share a lot of details about my personal life like that because this is a public platform, and I'm just careful about that kind of stuff. But I just want to testify that faith can absolutely produce, can bring beautiful, amazing things to fruition that will surprise not only you, but your friends and family. And you're going to have a lot of people, you're going to have like a dual struggle as you're moving forward. You're forging your path in life, and it's going to be both internal and external. You're going to have those seeds of doubt within you that you're working through, right? That you're trying to kick out and rebuke, as the Bible says. You're trying to, get rid of those so that it's not watering down that beautiful creative spark inside of you, and overshadowing your mustard seed of faith. But you're also going to have it on the outside, because the devil plants these seeds of doubt in everyone. So if your friends and family, you may think they're very supportive, but when you start to pitch this inspiration that God's planted in your heart to them, they may be kind of like, okay, good luck with that. Like, that's never going to happen. And I can tell you absolutely that when it does happen, jaws will hit the floor. And so I just want to encourage you that dreams can come true, but they're never going to do it unless you believe. That's the first step. So I just want to encourage you there. Okay, don't kill it. Don't kill the dream before it even has a chance. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, okay. So to move forward with my message, it's really more about our internal world, because here's the thing: you can accomplish great things in life, but if you have not love, you don't have anything. That's the ultimate. Love is the ultimate. And when you've come out of a very confusing, psychologically twisted situation, psychologically abusive situation, a controlling, manipulative situation, relationship, whatever, when you come out of that, just expect that you're going to have moments of slipping back into questioning yourself and your perception and the whole situation. And because think about it, if you've been exposed to years and years of gaslighting, then it makes sense that it's going to be a working through process. It's not a check a box process. It doesn't work that way. So, and the other part of it is just your own good character sometimes working against you. I know this firsthand, because if you're the kind of person that's very reasonable and logical, and you're very calculated in your decisions, you're like, I want to be real sure about this before I do it. You know what I mean? If it's a big decision, that's a good thing, but it can work against you when you combine it with gaslighting, because what happens is you wind up applying that same logic to this over here, and you're like, am I real sure that this wasn't my fault? Am I really sure? You're kind of applying that same habit that you have, which is good, but see, it's been worked against you because of all the gaslighting. So just give yourself a grace in that too. It doesn't mean that you're weak. It doesn't mean that you're not going to heal completely. It doesn't mean that you're bound to be stuck in this fog forever or anything like that. Just understand it's a process. Yeah. And that's, like I said, normal when you have those kind of values, to be careful. And really what I wrote is when you live life intentionally and cautiously, right? Which is in opposition to a risk taker. And wolves in sheep's clothing I see as risk takers, because even though they're very methodical when it comes to their malignant goals, and they can be very, very controlled and careful about their goals, which again are very devious and bad. But with everything else, it's kind of like they've this illness they have, or whatever, possession, whatever issues it is that drives them to live this way, deceiving others and working other people and manipulating them and stuff, exploiting. It's kind of like there's a splitting within them where they are super focused, hyper focused on their goal of exploitation, and that causes them to just have everything else in their life be out of order. If you'll notice, they'll have addictions and they'll just like overspend, and they'll it's just kind of like you see this. If you look, no matter what kind of facade they're putting in front of you and the community and everything else, if you really pay attention, or you look in the areas they think you're not observing or whatever, you'll see how nonsensical they really are. And they are actually very big risk takers. So, but anyone with a conscience is going to really think things through, because they know that their actions make lots of ripples. We know that, what was it, like a movie or something, or a book or an old saying where it talked about the butterfly wings, when there's a butterfly fluttering by, that, it can cause something huge to happen across the world. It's kind of like that, conceptually. I like to have metaphors that kind of helps me to grasp things, but that's how people who are ethical think. People with a conscience, they understand, like, let me be careful, with my actions. And you might even say that one's conscience determines their capacity to love and to be loved. Okay? So as far as goals are good and they're necessary for contentment. And I would even say the striving part of achieving a goal or trying to achieve a goal is good for growth. But at some point, and maybe depending on, your life and you and everything, at some point, I think we all come to this perspective that that Bible verse is so true, which is, if you can have everything in the world, but if you don't have love, you don't have anything. So the challenge, though, is finding other people who can meet you there, both in friendships and, as far as a partner. So what we don't want to have happen is for hurtful life experiences to kill the love inside of us. We don't want that to happen. And so ultimately, if you feel like love is still inside of your heart, if it's still living there, then you've won. You've won. Because you're never going to be perfect, and you're still going to probably have this process that you're working through from all these years of the devil planting seeds, and you didn't know that these weren't your own thoughts, so you just welcomed them right into your mind and heart, and you thought it was part of who you are. It's, again, that saying, I think it's in the Usual Suspects, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. That's exactly what I'm talking about with your thought life, okay? Which is why I like to think of the mind as a radio receiver, sort of, So, yeah. But that's the ultimate goal, to retain and appreciate and deepen and ultimately share the love that we have inside. To me, that's the ultimate goal in this life experience. So as you're getting back in balance, as you're you're working through your healing, and you're casting out these seeds of doubt, these seeds of deception, as you're making sense of things, you may have these waves of different emotions that happen, okay? And a lot of people equate crying to something bad, like weakness or a mindset of lack or things like that. But for some people, maybe all of us, I don't know, but for some people, it's a sign that love is still present inside of you, and that's a beautiful thing. Because if you think about the manipulative people that you've known in your life, they're very, just upon observation, they're very controlled. They're very robotic. They seem like kind of empty somehow. And if they do cry, you can tell it's fake. And it's fake because they're using that as part of their acting. And why are they doing that? To manipulate you. So they're just so rooted in this deception that it manifests in so many different ways. But someone who is still emotionally intact is healthy. Okay? So don't come down on yourself. Don't let the devil twist something as natural as emotion, like crying or whatever. Don't let the devil twist that in your mind and make you perceive that as a weakness. And of course, there's a balance that we need to get to. That's a great thing to strive for. Right there is a goal, is balance, in every way, every facet of life. But I found that as you're healing, you're going to have these waves of emotions. And to me, it's all about, that's good, is you're having them come back. It's about returning to this place of healthy, I don't know how to say this word, homeostasis, I guess. Yeah, because when you've lived your life under the thumb of a controller and you've been suppressed or held back or even stuck in a trauma response, like being frozen, it's kind of like I know what being frozen is like. That was my trauma response. It's kind of like you become numb. It's sort of like you're a zombie. You still have your conscience, unlike these people, wolves in sheep's clothing. You still have your conscience, but you can't access that inner guiding light anymore, and you're kind of detached in a way from even being able to think things through from your mind, your thinking mind. You're detached from your emotions. You're like a zombie, and so you're numb in that way. Or another term that's very accurate here is that you're brainwashed. You're brainwashed in this state, and because of that, you're detached from your emotions. You're under this other person's control. You're serving their agenda and you don't know it. So coming out of years and years of gaslighting and emotional hijacking and brainwashing means, when you're coming out of it, it means that you're getting reacquainted with yourself again. And you're waking up again. And it may be like, you may perceive it as you're waking up for the first time, because now you have this wisdom that was very hard earned. And yeah. And so to me, it's expected to have remnants of gaslighting effects, because you're trying to return, like the hero's journey that's circular. You're trying to return home, back to yourself. You're trying to learn again, once again, how to be sure of yourself. And that's a good thing. So my biggest tip with getting back in balance is patience. Okay, remember, a controlling person doesn't want you to have personal agency. They don't want that. So any variance from that internal snapshot that they've made of you in their mind will prompt a harsh punishment from them. Any sign of you snapping out of this brainwashed state, doing your own thinking, having some kind of emotion, anything like that, you're going to get punished for that. It's like they're going to, get you back in line, and make you back into this robot. It's kind of, if you think about, like, my daughter watches these cartoons, and there's several cartoons that have this same kind of theme. They just change it up a little bit for the different ones. It's kind of weird, like the villains in these cartoons all have a robot that they operate. And then the good guys have to fight the robot, and sometimes they know the villains are operating it from the inside, and sometimes they don't. They're surprised when they pop out. So it's kind of like that. It's kind of like you're the pawn. Sometimes it's called being the pawn or the puppet, or you're like that robot, and you literally experience life that way. You're cut off. You are robotic. You're living that way. You're cut off from your emotions and your, what they call, your personal agency and your thinking mind. It's weird. You become an extension of this wolf in sheep's clothing. It's a bizarre experience, but they keep you in line, man. So as you're coming out of it, just expect you're going to have remnants of self-doubt. And that's just part, to me, of breaking free of conditioning. You were conditioned. Conditioning is a real thing. Your brain, again, remember that quote I shared with y'all recently, is a terrible master, but a great servant. Well, they know that, and they just hijacked your brain to serve them instead of you. It's supposed to serve you so that you can make the choice to serve a higher being, the Lord God, right? They stole that from you, man. It's to kill, steal, and destroy. So, yeah, you're breaking free of conditioning. So, and I think with these people who are mentally ill, I think for some of them it may be an unconscious thing on their behalf. Like, maybe some people are just so insecure that they feel like they have to try and I don't know. I can't really make sense of it. I wrote maybe it's an unconscious thing on their behalf, because I think sometimes people that are insecure try to control their partner because they're afraid if they even meet another human being of the opposite sex, it's like, well, I'm out, but I wouldn't say that's unconscious. That was a bad example. The problem is I'm having a flood of examples, and I'm like, how do I pick and choose? And again, it's like I'm learning still, how to clarify. It's like really cool when you get back acquainted with that inner guiding light, and you're having this flood of information and an inspiration coming to you. It's like whoa, because it's beautiful, but it's just retraining yourself to make sense of that and to know what to focus on, know what to throw out, because you're now you've stepped into that gatekeeper role, and you know when to rebuke the seeds of doubt and the false thoughts that come in your mind and stuff. It's like it's a full-time job just to keep guard over your mind, which we're told to do, to guard our mind and heart. So it takes effort. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe for some people who are mentally ill, my understanding is they make a snapshot of who they perceive you to be and really desire and want you to be. They live in fantasy land, and then this internal snapshot of you lives in their mind, and if you act out of alignment with that, like a good example would be the movie Stepford Wives. I think it's been many years since I've seen it, and I think they even did a remake of it, but it's like they didn't want any deviation or any kind of sign of uniqueness or personal agency in their wives and so they just did something to make them robotic in the movie. And that's kind of how it is with some of these controllers. And I don't know if this process of making this internal snapshot of someone and then holding this person to these sometimes unspoken expectations. You don't even know what you're supposed to do. You're walking on eggshells. It's like nothing you do is right because you don't know what it is they want, because they won't tell you. Sometimes the communication is just totally absent. You're having to guess. That's a stressful way to live. So I don't know if this process for some people doing this snapshotting is unconscious or not. I think when some people maybe it is, and then in others we know it's not, and in others we know that they manipulate and control on purpose and they know what they're doing, So yeah, it's like your actions in either example. It's like if they're not going according to that person's plan, then I don't know. They don't like it. But ultimately, our goal in this, new, it feels almost like a second lifetime sometimes. But in our, and it's beautiful because it's like, even through the religious lens, it's, called being reborn. It's almost like you're given another chance at life, another shot. It's pretty cool. But ultimately, it's kind of like we need to reassess our priorities here. And I feel like we want to connect with people who have, not only the same values as us, but people who are as committed to love as we are too. So let's talk about that real quick. What does it mean to be committed to love? I mentioned earlier that I feel like there's a close association between conscience and love. So what would that mean? I would say to be self-aware, to strive at least to be self-aware. I don't think any person is going to always see every blind spot. And see, that's a beautiful thing, because then that Holy Spirit inside of you, that's how, to me, you can discern a wolf in sheep's clothing. They're so overly confident that they don't think they have blind spots, and they do, and you catch them. And so, but it's a good thing to strive to be self-aware for, good intentions. People who are able to introspect, people who want to introspect, and people who want to communicate their internal world with you. Controllers are flat, they're closed off, they're walled off. They don't want you to see inside of them because they probably have malignant plans for you or for other people through you or who knows what. So they're shut off, and they try to divert attention from that by getting you to focus on discussions about the weather or discussions about their new hobby or cars, and they're never going to discuss anything deep with you. And so if you're a deep person, you're going to miss having those kind of conversations when you're with a controller, I'll tell you that. But they're very flat, again, because they're very controlled and careful, so they don't expose themselves as being what they really are. Again, they speak only of worldly things without substance. That's how we describe that. It feels very superficial. And let me caution you here. Let me take this opportunity to pause and caution you here. And you may know this, but some of these wolves in sheep's clothing have had enough experience, and they have refined their art of manipulation so good that they've learned to fluently speak some impressive spiritual lingo and give you the impression that they are deep. And what they're doing is they're putting out like a we call it a decoy, I think. I don't know. It's like a hunting term. But they're putting out like this, pretend depth, when in reality they're just feeding you a bunch of BS. And this is even talked about in the Bible too. I tell you, the Bible, even if you're not a spiritual person, there's some real good life advice in there. To me, there's so much that gives it validity. I don't know how someone could deny it personally. There's no judgment. Look, whatever your beliefs are, but it's the more I live, the more I find I'm reminded of these verses. It's like, oh yeah, that's in there. Oh yeah, and you live to learn that it's true. So, I do anyway. But we're told to be wary of. Is it leery? It's not weary. Weary is when you're tired, right? Is it leery or wary? I don't know. Of people who say a lot, and they're, I think, soothsayers, and they impress you with all this babbling, and it even says, don't come to God that way. It says that in the Bible. Like, don't be like I forget what it's called, not charlatans, whatever it's called. Don't be like these people, essentially, that try to flatter God with words and just repeat themselves over and over and over, because that don't work with God. You know what I mean? I think that's cool. That's in there. Well, we need to be like that too. Like, hey, that ain't gonna work with me. I see what you're doing. And so we need to be able to discern that. And I think that's hard. Because that's just a whole nother level of discernment that we need to strive to get to. Because there are people who are genuinely deep and genuinely spiritual. And it's kind of like, how do you differentiate that? I think there's ways, but we need to refine that part of our discernment for sure. So that was a real big pause, or a real big tangent. But anyway, important, nevertheless. So generally, I feel like when you come out of these bad situations, don't you love how we sum all this up into 2 words, bad situations? But when you come out of that, it's like we want people who are as committed to love as us, people who share our values, not just in their words but their actions too, and people generally who are as deep as us, and who walk their talk. And communication is so important, but it doesn't need to overshadow actions and your observations. But it is important. And I think that it's critical to avoid assumptions at all costs. It can cost you a beautiful friendship, a beautiful relationship, and it can cost you your safety. On the flip side, it can cost you your peace and contentment. It's a really, really important thing. And that right there is why we take our time in getting recalibrated and questioning things, even ourselves. It's good to a degree, and emotions are just going to come along with that. Don't condemn yourself for that. It's how we're made as human beings. So ultimately, though, we want to learn to follow our gut once again. So I opened by saying, we're learning to forge our way forward, forge our path forward. I looked up the word forge in the online etymology dictionary, and it says to make way, move ahead slowly with difficulty, or by mere momentum. Also, it means steady hammering at something. It said originally and properly nautical in reference to vessels in nautical use. From the Latin fabricare, meaning to frame, construct, or build. And that's from the 12th century. And then, of course, as it evolved, we had this meaning in the 14th century go to meaning counterfeit. To forge meaning counterfeit, right? Or falsify. But prior to that, it meant to fashion or build or construct, right? Let me just say this. I have had an important revelation with all these word studies that I've been doing that, the negative meanings, the twisting of the meanings of these words comes after the original. That's either a neutral meaning or just a good positive meaning. The twisting part comes after. So if we remember that truth is truth at all levels, and there is a Bible verse on this, that if you can see, having the eyes to see means that you can see, like, for example, a pattern in a leaf in nature. I'm looking at this little boxwood or something, bush out here. If you can learn to see the patterning in God's design to a certain degree, not that we can have it all figured out by any means, but it's kind of like you can learn to see truth, then you can apply it everywhere. There's a Bible verse on that. I wish so bad I could find it. It was just so important. It's one of those things where you're like, oh, I'll never forget that, and then you forget it. So that's what happens to me. But if I make a note on something, I never need the note, and if I say I'll never forget that, I forget it. It's like almost a surefire way to not to forget something. But truth is truth at all levels. That's put it in my terms. So when we see this pattern of, remember the words, the meaning turning into something negative and being twisted, we understand that can apply to how the lie affects our life too. Think about it. Our first gut instinct is almost always right? Maybe it is always right, but we say almost because the problem is maybe we miss that first gut instinct, and we are misperceiving our first gut instinct as, the twisting or something. I think sometimes the issue is just us and our perception, but our first gut instinct, you might say, is that original definition, that original discernment, that original thought. And then the devil, think about even the Garden of Eden, right? The devil comes after the truth that's given to us by God to try and persuade you to the opposite of what God's already told you. That part comes after. So, and we take it in, we welcome this persuasion in and misperceive it as our own thoughts. We think it's us, see? Which is why we need to, to me, this is why there's the same themes in all these legends and fairy tales throughout time of these different roles. I think in psychology, when a person's psyche is broken down just for terms of assessment and comprehension, it's called family systems, a family systems approach, the different parts of one's mind. That's kind of, to me, what's personified in these stories of old, okay? And so they're, even the parables in the Bible, it's, you can gain a lot from that, and understanding that there's a gatekeeper role or a parental role there for a reason, and to check what's coming in or coming at you. We don't need to just be an open door in that regard, and just, to me, that key is understanding that we're not alone. When you think you're alone, you perceive everything as your own thoughts. When you know you're not alone in the spiritual, and the physical, but in the spiritual too, then you check those thoughts. You guard your mind, okay? You see the separation. You need to understand that you are your own unique individual self. And so, but the truth comes before the twisting of it. So I just want to encourage you to take heart. The Bible says to give no thought also for the morrow, for tomorrow will take care of itself. And to me, that's a call for us to walk in faith. Because think about it, if we're only shown, exactly what step to take, step by step, and that's all God shows us, He sees the rest of the story Himself. We don't. He's the one that's got the ultimate bird's eye view. We don't. So He's calling us to take one step at a time, and I feel like that's a way of gifting us with proof that He's there with us and leading us and guiding us. But we have to accept this gift by walking in faith, by saying, okay, I trust that you see the plans that you have for me, which it says He has plans for us. I trust you, Father, and I will take one step at a time because that's all you're showing me, see? And so it's a way to live in surrender, and yet you're empowered because you're not doing it alone. So it means you're focused on today is what it means. You're in the present. It's cool because you get to be in the present when you're not worried about the future. That's another gift. It's just layers and layers of gifts, from God, if you allow them. And we need to learn to be confident in our past actions that were aligned with our gut instincts. Just really get rooted down in that and understand that, these doubts that are coming at you are from the devil. So, where are you placing your intentions, right? Or not intentions, attention. It's interesting. Yeah, where are you placing your attention? So expect some activity, I would say, where you have moments where you feel out of balance with your thoughts. If you're ruminating, if you have emotions that feel, overwhelming, whatever it is, I would just expect some activity. Like they say, like with volcanoes and earthquakes, it's like they're monitoring that stuff, and sometimes the news will say there's some activity over here, something might be brewing or whatever. Same thing with you, you're an organic being too, just like nature. Expect some activity as you're getting recalibrated. That's normal, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. But just remember to check your thoughts at that, especially your thoughts of self-doubt at that gate. Okay, have that gate. Be aware of that gate. Utilize that gate. Take authority over that gate. And and what's interesting is, like I was saying, the fairy tales and folklore, all these stories throughout time, they typically have the gatekeeper role early in the story fail. It's usually personified by a parental figure, and they're just really naive, or just uneducated, or they're easily deceived, and by the devil or whatever. They make a deal with the devil, whatever it is. But these gatekeeper roles typically fail earlier in the story. And then what happens is the hero, they meet up with their helpers, as they're walking the path. And let me just say, it's real. The storyline, the general storyline of the hero's journey is actually our life journey, and it's real. I don't think this is something that a wolf in sheep's clothing will experience, though. So it's not for everyone. It's only for those who truly love truth and try their best to live in alignment with it in all facets, and to detect, where it's not, where truth is not at on the outside and even on the inside, coming in as thoughts. And the hero's journey is for truth seekers and those who love the truth. But guess who fills that gatekeeper role when that parental character doesn't do so good of a job, and they're usually killed off? A lot of these stories, either from the start of the story or early on in the story, the main character or characters, if they're children, a lot of times they're children, they're young too, or young maiden, things like that. You know, the princess in the stories, they're all so similar for a reason. They're orphans, or they become orphaned in the story. So that gatekeeper role is done away with. And so who winds up feeling that role in the story? It's the hero. The main character winds up doing it. So the hero themselves, or sometimes it's a partnership if they get married, because they are fortified. That gatekeeper role is now good and right and strong because they are fortified with the wisest, most powerful force in existence. The one upstairs, right? So realize that force in you. That should be our goal, to realize that force within us, and also to be able to discern it in others, right? To find our people. So I just hope that you are encouraged and inspired by this message. I hope that you found it beneficial and valuable. I thank you so much for coming along to hear the message. I hope that you have a beautiful day. And remember, one day at a time, one step at a time, and check those seeds of doubt and just rebuke them and get rid of them right away. And just continue to be patient with yourself and know that it is a process, and that God does have amazing and wonderful plans for you and I. So again, thank you so much. I hope that you found it beneficial, and I hope that you have a beautiful day. I'll see you again very soon.